Hi, I'm Jack and welcome back to Real Opinions. We're still at London Film Festival. This is another one of the reviews in that kind of set. If you want to see any of the other ones that we've covered at the festival, maybe there's one that you know was showing and you were interested to see what we kind of thought or what anyone thought of it, in which case there's links down in the description to the playlist, so yeah, check it out. But in this episode I'm going to be reviewing American Honey. I was cautiously optimistic for American Honey just because I really liked the director, Andrea Arnold's, not last film, but I suppose the sort of breakout film for her, which was Fish Tank, and I really did enjoy that film, and I'm going to talk about it just for a bit because I think it's in many ways it's very similar to American Honey, and I think that my praise of Fish Tank leads to a lot of the criticisms in American Honey. So Fish Tank was a British film kind of following this teenage girl stuck in an estate as she tries to break her way out like in a rags to riches story, but just kind of deals with her life and kind of dreams of eventually making her way out. I thought, when thinking back on the film after this, I thought, it was like a 90 minute film, and that was a great pacing, it was good all the way through. Looking it up, it's a 2-hour long film, and it doesn't feel that long. It felt way shorter just because it was so captivating, even though it felt very off the cuff in the way that it was filmed. All the characters felt really solid and you could understand them instantly, despite this kind of rough around the edges style that it's going for. It had an energy that I felt like you made me want to watch the whole time, and it's something that I look forward to watching again at some point. American Honey, on the other hand, is 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it feels longer, personally. I know that some people enjoy this type of film immensely. Typically I do. All the elements are there for me to enjoy this film, basically, and I can't. So why did I kind of compare it to Fish Tank in the beginning, just besides the running time, which is something that I'll come back to. I'm not just putting that out there and then leaving it. Well, for starters, the protagonists are very, very similar in that they're both teenage girls that kind of want to break out the system. They're stuck in a low-income house. They're dealing with young kids that the parents don't care for, so they've kind of had to grow up themselves, and by doing so, they're also a bit more caring than people around them in their society. They're a bit more in tune with nature, and that sounds like it's a very vague point, but it plays a lot into the visual styles of both films. However, in Fish Tank, she's stuck in this estate, and then in American Honey, she kind of does the opposite. She bumps into these guys led by Shia LaBeouf. They're a bunch of, just a gang, almost, a posse, in a minivan that travel across the country, seemingly endlessly playing rap music and selling magazines to make a living to go on to the next place, etc., etc. They're not, strictly speaking, scam artists, but they've got pretty shady ways of trying to sell you these magazines just so they can make a quick buck and just live a kind of very freewheeling, no responsibility lifestyle that they all lead. The way that kind of sets up is that it's almost like you feel like there's more plot points to be had with American Honey than you could do with Fish Tank, but it's such a repetitive film all the way through. I suppose in many ways you could call it a kind of like an artsy road trip movie, but with that, I mean, it's always a point in every road trip movie, whether it be like beer pong tournament, college-style comedy to kind of artsy road trip. It's always, at some point, they bring up some kind of theme of, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It's the cliche, but that's what everyone says. However, with all of these films, the road trip at the beginning has a purpose, as in it has a destination, and while the journey is important for the characters, obviously, and it's what we enjoy the most, it has a destination, so it has a clear ending at the point of the film, and sure, they can go on the trip after that, but for the sake of the story, we've reached some kind of conclusion, we've reached some kind of point where we could end, and this feels kind of like a road trip movie where literally the most important thing is the journey, even though it is said figuratively in a lot of films, it's the journey that matters, not the destination. This one, it's entirely journey without proper destination. That's not to mean that there are points where it made sense for the film to kind of wrap up and it could possibly end. There are a lot of moments like that, actually, throughout the film, but every single one, you get to it and you think, okay, so this is going to be the end. And then it just seems to just keep going. But okay, first I'm going to talk about the positives. The cinematography, as always with Andrea Arnold's work, is brilliant. I don't typically go for this kind of, not false documentary look, but it's all handheld, shaky, kind of like, it's because it's all, like I said before with the other film, it's all off the cuff kind of stuff. It looks as though it's half improv, half scripted a lot of the time, and that goes the same with the camera work in that it always feels like the cameraman is actually running about the scene as opposed to having a set take this shot, take this shot, take this shot. That also means that when they do insert shots and stuff like that, it feels like it's genuinely taking kind of like a snapshot from the moment, as opposed to just this shot is here because this represents here and I've thought about this beforehand. But yeah, cinematography wise, it looks great, even though that's not really my style that I typically like. They always manage to make the shots look really there's a lot of stunning shots in this film, and I think if it wasn't as great to look at, it wouldn't have nearly kept me captivated for as long as it did. Characters, I'd say that actually, surprisingly, my favourite character was probably Shia LaBeouf's character. Strangely, I think he had the most charisma. His kind of role is that he's second in command to the magazine group, so he's the kind of day-to-day runner, but not the top boss. But he kind of still acts like he has this power, and then when the boss comes in, it's suddenly dog with a tail in between his legs. And even though that's not completely new or fresh, it was the way that he did it, which was really interesting. And he's kind of their lead salesman, and so he'd go to different houses, and the gist is that he goes to different houses and he tries on different personas in order to sell the magazines. And I'm not talking like massive shifts in persona or anything like that, but just like slight things in order to cater to the person and what they want to hear in order to sell it. And that was, I'd say, probably the most interesting bit of the film, just trying to watch him just sell magazines. I mean, it sounds strange, but also a lot of the funniest parts came from him. And comedy is not the primary concern of this film, obviously, but it's the few moments where it makes you laugh, you're kind of happy that they're there. It gives it a bit more levity, and I think they're always with these kind of dramas where they're trying to show a bit of the darker side of the world or the sadder side of the world. It always helps to have a bit of the comedy just to kind of draw you in and make you, I don't know, I think it just makes you more connected to the characters and more connected to the world if there's the occasional laugh, which I think did relatively well in this film. The lead girl, I think, was really well acted. Actually, this is her first film. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but this is her first feature. They said in the Q&A that she was picked up by the director just when she was on spring break, so it's like she hasn't had any experience in features at all. And I think she really held her own. I mean, it's not like she's going to suddenly end up on these 10 stars to watch lists, and I wouldn't jump at the chance of seeing her in another film, but she's definitely someone that could deservedly make a career in the industry. Her character, on the other hand, was all right, but wasn't massively fascinating. Like, she just kind of felt like she didn't really have flaws at all, which just made her a bit boring to watch. I mean, she made bad decisions, and she wasn't the brightest, but to be honest, that's all down to her that's due to situation as opposed to her actual nature. The reason why she's uneducated is because she's poor, and the reason why she's like this is because she's been treated like this. But it's never like she's just supposed to be this perfect person, almost, in a way. Like, I said earlier, she's connected to nature. She's the most caring out of all of the magazine sellers, and with the magazine sellers, a lot of them trying to do these kind of shady selling tactics, and her tactic is just to be honest with the customer and just kind of talk to them and find out their story and all of that, which is fine for like the first time / second time, just because it's something different and it's the first time that it's actually showing the characters that aren't being annoying. That gets very easy very quick, and when you realise it's just it's more set up so that she looks like a better character as opposed to bringing in more interesting characters or actually having some kind of point with these characters, which kind of features back into my main concern with this film, is that it's very, very repetitive. It reaches this point where once she's got on the road, which is around 20-30 minutes into the film, I probably reckon, and then it just does the same things over and over again until the ending. It's just kind of like the repeating of the cycle over and over again. So she goes out selling with the guy, she falls a bit more for the guy, they have a moment, he blows her off, she goes with the customer, then they have like this chat where she's honest with them and they respect that, and they eventually buy magazines from her, and then the guy shows up and ruins it after she's already made the sale because he's jealous, and so their romance goes even further, and that just repeats itself I think about 3 times in the film, which I know it doesn't sound too much, but it's the way that it's presented, in that it's all the same kind of shots again, the same kind of moments again. The soundtrack is incredibly annoying, not in that the whole point is that this crew kind of plays really bass heavy rap music the whole time, like that's their kind of characteristic of the trip, I suppose. And I don't really mind the rap music, actually. Like, rap music isn't something that I instantly hear and hate. I mean, I quite like actually a lot of rap music these days, surprisingly, but it was the fact that they went for the really vapid rap in order to show how kind of airheaded these people are. So they're playing these really empty songs. But it's not only the fact that they play shallow songs that's the problem. It's the fact that they keep repeating the same ones. Towards the end, I got that they are repeating these same songs because basically to show that these people that live this so-called wild, carefree lifestyle still have a routine just like everyone else. It's just that, and if anything, it's more dull because they're just sat in this truck listening to the same songs over and over again with no prospect or anything like that. And I got what they wanted to achieve, but they shouldn't make the audience feel the same way in that regard. Sometimes empathy is good in films, but not in some ways. If you are meant to show life is, you don't want to make the audience member feel like their life is also mundane. That could make it sound like I just didn't get the film, but when I've heard the same rap song for the 5th time and it's the same chorus and it's just this thumping heavy bass behind my head and I'm just hearing like this I'm not gonna rap but it's the fact that it's the same songs over and over and over again, and it just really drills into you that this is the same, and that combines with the plot in that it's the same things repeating over and over again. And so at the end of each of these cycles, you think that it's possibly that's when the film's going to end, or there's going to be some kind of concluding thing as well, and that's when the film's going to end. But then it goes, the cycle happens again, and then again, and then again. And it just got to the point where I completely lost interest in it. I'm not going to give it a negative score because I admire a lot of the filmmaking behind it. Like, I felt like the editing was really good in points, despite the kind of hard nature that when there's a lot going on in one scene, like, it's a bit too jarring because obviously they can't, if everyone's just acting on a whim, you can't really cut seamlessly with some of that stuff, and so there's a bit of jarring things, like there's a few continuity errors and stuff like that, but I can appreciate the editing still. Overall, I felt like it was a well tied together product. It's just that it was needlessly long without making any further points, anything new. It was kept harking on the same point repeatedly, and to be honest, I don't entirely get what it was going for because it was so vague. It was American dream, American identity, America, and I'm just like, yes, you can talk about America, you can talk about specific features of America. I mean, and I think I'm also coming to this as the filmmaker came to this, which is America as an outsider, this kind of very like perfected image that you see in Hollywood, but at the same time it's got this really kind of seedy underbelly, just kind of, there's a lot wrong with the country, there's a lot poor, there's a lot disparaged and all of that. It just felt like it was making a lot of slapdash points without diving into anything and holding on to it. And when it kept coming back to these same things over and over again, you just realised as it went on that they're never going to go into any detail on anything. They're never going to really dive into anything. And at that point, it just felt almost as shallow as the people that it was highlighting, which, again, some critics could argue that that's a good point, that it's trying to be as shallow as the people that did it. But I don't know, I'd actually rather watch Spring Breakers again than this. That's actually quite a good film to compare it to, in that Spring Breakers, a lot of people complained that was really repetitive, but strangely enough, I found this to be more repetitive, and it was just because of it was how drawn out the repetitive cycles were. Whereas with Spring Breakers, it was designed in order to make you fall into this kind of trance, I suppose. That was the kind of style that it was going for. Whereas here, it's more like lulling you peacefully into sleep. Not that I fell asleep, but I mean, it felt lulling. I'm not going to give it a negative score because I do feel like it was really quite well made, and that's what I appreciate a lot with it. But the story was lacking, the pacing was lacking, and it was repetitive, not helped by the music. Enjoyment level, I would give it a 5 out of 10. I don't hate it despite how I've talked about it. I don't dislike it despite how I've talked about it, but I don't particularly, I never want to watch this again the same way that I want to watch Fish Tank again, and I never felt like I got anything out of this the way that I felt that I got stuff out of Fish Tank. If you're interested in seeing this film and you haven't seen Fish Tank, I'd recommend going to see that. I'd say this is a 6 out of 10. If you want to see any other films that we've covered on the festival, please click somewhere on the screen, I'm sure there's a link, or down in the description.